Okay, so today I'll tell you about physiology of nutrition and about main components which we intake with food. As you know, nutrition it's all components which help us for realized many functions. First of all, it's building our body, our cells, tissues, maintains homeostasis, maintains many biochemical reactions in our body, and recovering from any damages for better adaptation to environment. You know that nutrition divide on two main groups. It's major components, which consist from carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, and other components which including vitamins and minerals, microelements, trace components, and water. First of all, physiological role of main components of our food. Carbohydrates, which we intake mostly from plants, but additionally some animal tissues, animal food, like milk, for example, liver and muscles, have carbohydrates too, but mostly we intake carbohydrates from plants. Lipids we can acquire in as from vegetables, from plants, as from animal products. But lipids depend from source, divide on two groups. It's saturated lipids or fats which we can acquire from animals, and unsaturated fats, or other name is oils, which we intake from vegetable food. Next group is proteins, which divide again on several groups. It's complete proteins, mostly it's proteins from animal food, and incomplete proteins, which we intake with vegetables. They have not all essential amino acids. Next group, it's vitamins, which we used for many biochemical reactions, organic reactions, like catalyzers or enzymes for improve speed of these reactions. And minerals, which we intake in very small concentration in food. It's usually several grams or even milligrams, depend from minerals, per day. But they are like vitamins, play many roles in our body. For example, it's increasing speed of reactions, biochemical reactions, realized electrical processes in our body, realized growing of our body, building bones, muscles, and many other functions. And you should know main principle of metabolic relationship between main components of food. So you may find in this slide that three major groups of sources, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates in our body during digestion divide on simplest components. It's amino acids from proteins, glucose and monosaccharides, disaccharides from carbohydrates, glycerol, fatty acids, cholesterol from fats. And in the cells we have ability to convert through small molecules like acetyl coenzyme A, convert all these sources between each other. As a result, from common wave through production of acetyl coenzyme A, we may use all these sources for convert energy in chemical storage, storing energy, like on previous lecture I told you, in molecules of ATP, adenosine 3-phosphate. It means that in our body we can produce energy from any source. All these molecules we can divide, and as a result we will receive ATP. And it's very useful for our body because depend from types of food we can produce energy from any source. But other very important role, these relationships give ability to convert one organic molecule to other. And in our body, if we have diet, for example, with increased concentration of carbohydrates but small amount of fats, proteins, we can build in some lipids and proteins from glucose molecules. We can produce carbohydrates from fats, proteins, and so on. As a result, these connections help to produce all components, not only for energy but for plastic functions, for building new components of our cells, for growing, and mostly for storage. This is a very popular tendency nowadays. If our body receive a lot of sources but not need all of them, we can transfer one source to other, for example proteins, carbohydrates to fats, and storing fats in our adipose tissues, and it leads to obesity. Next component of food, now I tell you about main components, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Carbohydrates, its main component by total amount, more than half of all amount of food which we daily intake, including carbohydrates. And most amount of carbohydrates, it's complex polymer molecules, which including many oligomer and monomer molecules. Main examples of these polymer carbohydrates, it's starch, it's molecule which we can intake from plants, and these polymeric molecules like chain, which including many glucose molecules. During digestion, breaking down links between glucose molecules, and from starch in our body we can release glucose and transfer for energy production in our cells. Second example of polymeric carbohydrates, it's glycogen. It's again a complex molecule which including many glucose molecules, but main differ between starch and glycogen. First one we intake from plants, second one from animals. First one have chain form, second one have branched form, as you can see in this slide. And during digestion, branches digest much faster comparing to starch molecule. As a result, for digestion in our body, glycogen is better and may digest more efficient. But in any way, all these molecules, as a result, convert into glucose molecules, and from glucose, as I told previously, our body can produce energy, ATP molecules, may produce fatty acids and building new lipids, or may convert into glycogen in polymeric carbohydrate. Again, it's helpful if we need storing this component of food for a long period of time. For all these reactions, very helpful liver, which in our body realized many conversions. Main reactions you may find in this slide. It's glycogenolysis, glyconeogenesis, reactions for producing polymeric molecules from glucose, from amino acids and fats. Again, we can produce glucose, breaking down glycogen into glucose, and all these conversions, it's opposite reactions. So normally in healthy body we have balance between all these reactions, and in some situations increased. For example, speed of glucogenesis, production of glycogen. In some situations when we need more energy, this glycogen breaking down and glycogenolysis takes place. But in general, we have balance between these processes. Next component of food is lipids, and lipids, it's more common term than fats. We used for many functions. First of all, it's a source of lipids for our cells, for building new molecules of hormones, components of cell membranes, tissues. Second, it's synthesizing of our own lipids for storing, and of course, very important function, it's production of energy, because lipids are much better for releasing energy compared to other sources. Twice more energy from same amount of lipids we can produce in our body compared to carbohydrates and proteins. And again, we return to interconnections between biochemical processes in our body and production of fatty acids and glycerol from lipids. This process named lipolysis. And as a result, from fatty acids and glycerol we can produce ATP, or we can convert into cholesterol, mostly for provide steroid hormones. We can produce ketone bodies and fatty acids for building new lipids. It's lipogenesis. And all these reactions normally in our body balanced, and some branches of this balance may increased or decreased, depend from needs in our body. Previously I told you about two main groups of lipids. It's saturated and unsaturated lipids or fats. Saturated, it's mostly from animal sources, and normally in environment temperature they are solid and named fats. Unsaturated lipids product from plants, and normally they have liquid form and named oils. Next, differ between these types of lipids, its functions. For unsaturated fats or oils, we have more plastic functions, and in our body we used these fats not only for receive energy, but additionally for synthesizing many hormones and biological active substances. Additionally, you should know about group of molecules with common name phospholipids. It's again molecules which produced from lipids, from fats in our food, but specificity of these phospholipids, these molecules take part in forming of cell membranes, and without lipids in our food we could not synthesize phospholipids, and we could not synthesize normal cell membranes, especially for neuron cells, and it may lead abnormal diet, even may lead to damaged or retardation of neuron cells growing. And next component of lipids in our food, it's cholesterol. Actually, it's again one component of fats from the food, but cholesterol have very important functions. It's convert into hormones, sex hormones, hormones of adrenal gland in our body. That's why abnormal intake in cholesterol may lead to diseases and many problems. As decreased amount of cholesterol in the food is bad, as increased level of cholesterol, it's again not good. Over production of hormones and storing of cholesterol may lead to diseases, metabolic diseases. Next component of food is proteins, and proteins have a lot of functions. You may see much more comparing to other components of food. It's plastic functions, building cells, cell membranes, enzymes in cells, hormones, for transport, nutrition, oxygen in our blood, for homeostatic reactions, regulation of water balance, ion balance, pH, immunic functions. With help of proteins we can resist from some viruses and microorganisms. And of course proteins may used like source of energy, or may transfer to other components of food. Normally we in our cells divide proteins into amino acids, simplest molecules which we can product during digestion. It's amino acids, and amino acids in our body may breaking down for receive ATP, or may synthesize for building new our own proteins. And these reactions control, because they are very important, with many mechanisms. Mostly it's endocrine mechanisms with many hormones which regulate speed of protein metabolic rate. Mostly it's growth hormone, hormones of adrenal gland like cortisol, sex hormones, steroid hormones, insulin, and many other. Conversions of proteins and amino acids take part in liver. You can see liver used for many reactions, building our own fats, carbohydrates, proteins, realized with help of this gland in our body. But we have some specificity for proteins metabolism. You may see in this slide reactions with common name transamination. What it means? We have many types of amino acids, and in our body we can produce not only lipids and carbohydrates from proteins, but we can produce from one amino acid other, and as a result from new amino acids we can build in new proteins. But these reactions of transamination lead to product not only amino acids but additionally product ammonia, and this is side effect of transamination reactions, because ammonia is very toxic molecule, and we have specific mechanism for removing this molecule from our blood and from our body. It's excretion through urine, and normally we used kidneys mostly for excrete ammonia from our body. This is side effect of metabolism proteins and amino acids from these proteins. Next, you should remember about essential amino acids. 10 amino acids which we could not build in our body with reactions of transaminations. It's essential amino acids. And for these amino acids we could not use transamination reactions, and we should intake them from food. And food, proteins in food, which including these essential amino acids, it's complete proteins. Proteins which have not all essential amino acids, named incomplete proteins, and mostly incomplete proteins without all essential amino acids. It's proteins from the plants, proteins from animal sources, much better because they including more essential amino acids. Next component of food is vitamins. You should know two main groups of vitamins: fat soluble and water soluble. Fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, as you can understand from their names, can dissolve in lipids, and all lipids which we intake with food usually have dissolved these vitamins. Like, for example, milk, liver, fish, some fruits may be good sources not only for lipids but additionally for vitamins. And we used these vitamins for additional functions. In general, all vitamins, it's like catalyzers. They increase speed of reactions in our tissues. But some specificity we can take in different types of vitamins. For example, vitamin A mostly necessary for epithelial cells, for skin, for development and pigmentation of retina in our eyeball, for bones and teeth development. So as a result, increased and decreased level of vitamin A may lead to problems in these organs and tissues. Vitamin D helpful for development bones and calcium metabolism in our body. But calcium used not only for bone development, but for teeth, for muscles, and for neuron cells, which require calcium for producing electrical processes. Vitamin E have specificity like prevention of oxidative stress, destroying of cells, cell membranes during metabolic activity, and vitamin E protect our cells from this damaging. That's why they're very useful for protection, and additionally much more important during pregnancy for building new tissues of babies, and overactivity of this vitamin may lead to side effects. All vitamins should intake in proper concentration, because as decreased as increased amount of these vitamins in our body may lead to side effects. And vitamin K, which including in processes of regulation blood flow, they necessary for synthesizing proteins, realized blood clotting. Again, this very important function, but side effects may take place as with decreased amount of vitamin K, speed of production components of blood clot like prothrombin will decrease and person may suffer from bleeding. Or opposite situation, excess activity of prothrombin may take place with increased concentration of vitamin K, and it may lead to excessive coagulation of blood. Next group of vitamins is water soluble. Most and best source of food for these vitamins is plants, because most amount of these vitamins came in our body with plants. Only a few types of animal food like milk, for example, meat, eggs, liver may be a source of water-soluble vitamins, but much more concentration of these vitamins we may find in plants. Again, these vitamins used like cofactors, coenzymes, catalyzers for many reactions, building ATP in our body, building coenzyme A, building pyruvate acid, building NAD and NAD ash. All these molecules take part in metabolic processes in synthesizing energy in our body. So as a result, abnormal presence of vitamins B1, B2, B5, B6, niacin may lead to side effects, and mostly this side effect including fatigue, including retardation, including many problems with tissues, and in very severe situations, especially for deficit of niacin, vitamin B2, it may be problems with neuron tissue, because abnormal energy production may lead to abnormal activity of neuron cells. Specific function of vitamin B12, you should know, it's stimulation of red blood cells production. That's why in many situations when person have anemia, small amount of red blood cells, we should think about abnormal intake of vitamin B12. Additionally, folic acid regulates these processes too, but deficit of folic acid is very rare, because this vitamin and other vitamin biotin, including in a huge amount of sources of food components, and almost all vegetables and milk and liver and many other components, including these vitamins. That's why normally if person have intake different types of food, they didn't suffer from deficit of folic acid and biotin. And last water soluble vitamin, it's vitamin C or ascorbic acid. Again, this cofactor for many reactions, and typical for vitamin C, take part in metabolism of amino acids and building new proteins, especially collagen. That's why deficit of vitamin C may lead to problems with synthesizing proteins in many tissues. Most typical it's abnormality in skin, many inflammations, scurvy, decreased speed of healing wounds, decreased immune resistance, and again due to presence of vitamin C in many products, deficit nowadays is quite rare. But persons with not good diet, without intaking fresh food and vegetables, may suffer from scurvy, deficit of vitamin C. In general, deficit of vitamins, especially water-soluble vitamins, is more serious compared to deficit of main components of food, because a person have survived about 1-2 months without food, and it's not so serious. We have reservoir of carbohydrates, fats, proteins in our body, but deficit of vitamins may lead to suffer much faster, about 2 weeks, and symptoms may appear, symptoms of deficit vitamins like asthenia, decreased amount of energy production, decreased speed of building new components like proteins in our body, decreased immunity, decreased cardiovascular activity, and many other side effects. Next component of food, it's minerals, which divide into groups. Major minerals, which normally we intake about 1 or several grams per day, and trace elements which we not need in these concentrations, even several milligrams per day, 1000 times less concentration compared to major minerals. But deficit of trace element may lead to problems too. That's why you should know about a role of all these components in our body. Major minerals like calcium, sodium, potassium are used for regulation activity of cells. Calcium need for bones, teeth growing, but additionally you should know about role of calcium in muscle contraction and in conduction of electrical impulses. That's why deficit of calcium may lead to problems not only in bones. Many persons suffer from spasms in muscles, from decreased activity of neuron system due to deficit of this mineral. And opposite situation, excess amount of calcium may lead to problems, kidney stones, abnormal muscle contraction again, abnormal production of action potentials. That's why we need normal concentration and not try to intake much more than we need. Next types of major minerals is potassium, phosphorus. Again, we need several grams per day for every mineral, but for other functions. Potassium mostly we intake for maintain osmotic pressure, for maintain metabolic rate, and for maintain resting membrane potential in our excitable cells, muscle cells, neuron cells, endocrine cells. Phosphorus together with calcium need for development bones and teeth, and as a result abnormal concentration of this mineral may lead to abnormality in these tissues. But additionally you should know that phosphorus one of essential component for ATP molecules which we used like source of energy in our body. That's why for building ATP molecules, for building some proteins and vitamins, we need small concentration of this mineral every day. Sodium, very well known mineral. You should remember that this mineral take part in membrane potential processes, resting membrane potential, action membrane potential. So without normal level of sodium ions, person will have problems with excitable cells. But additionally sodium maintain osmotic pressure, amount of water in blood. That's why persons with increasing intake sodium will suffer from hypertension, and opposite situation, decreased level of sodium ions in our body lead to hypertension, decreased blood pressure, decreased amount of water in bloodstream, and this is not good. Sulfur quite popular in nowadays because we know about a role of this mineral for building some vitamins like thiamine, biotin, for building proteins, amino acids, and especially this mineral important for such tissues like skin, nails, and hair. we need normal intake with food, this microelement for normal condition of our skin, hair, and so on. Chlorine used together with sodium ions, because most popular source is sodium chloride, and regulate near the same functions, maintain pH, osmotic pressure, regulation of metabolic processes in muscles, and additionally regulate digestion, because chlorine used like source of acids in our body, especially hydrochloric acid for digestion processes in stomach. Very popular and very important microelement, it's magnesium. You should know that this microelement have several functions. First of all, it's regulation of ATP production, but additionally magnesium it's microelement which work like antagonist to calcium ions in cell membranes. Permeability of cell membrane for calcium decreased with presence of magnesium, and as a result this microelement help for protect our cells, our tissues from overactivity in situations when our muscle cells, neuron cells very active. We can decrease and slow down processes in these cells by intaking additional amount of magnesium, and in many situations it may be helpful due to specific relationship between two minerals. And trace elements, as I told you, it's minerals which we need in very small concentration, few milligrams per day. But role of these microelements is very important. For example, iron, which we need for building our red blood cells, manganese, which need for building many enzymes for synthesizing fatty acids and cholesterol, for development of our neuron system, iodine, which necessary for synthesizing thyroid hormones. Yes, we need a small concentration, few milligrams per day only, but without this iodine ions, our thyroid gland will not produce hormones, and it will lead to many problems for whole our body. Same role, regulation of building for some components typical for other trace elements, cobalt, zinc. They used like components of enzymes. It means that organic molecules, enzymes, didn't work properly without small concentration of minerals. And for improving speed of enzymatic reactions, we should intake small amount of cobalt, zinc, and many other trace elements. And fluorine, you should know if you take care about your teeth, because teeth development and strength of teeth structures depend from presence of small amount fluorine in the food, and as a result in the blood. For normal healthy body, we should intake all these components of food, all nutritions, microelements, and in common situation we should have balanced diet. What it means balanced diet? First of all, balanced diet, it means diet which adequate amount of energy which we intake with food, and amount of energy which we breaking down for some processes in our body. And for normal diet, we should know about two terms, two parameters. I tell you about these parameters in previous lecture, but I remind you it's basal metabolic rate and common metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate, it's amount of energy which we need for our vital organs activity, like heart, brain, kidneys, liver and lungs. And usually we can calculate amount of this energy with formula, like in this slide, about 1 kilocalorie per kilogram of body per hour. And you can multiply this parameters and receive basal metabolic rate. Usually it's about 1,500, 1,600, 700 kilocalories per day, depend from body weight. And as a result, if you care about your healthy diet, you should intake not less than this amount of energy which require for your vital organs activity. But additionally, you used energy for muscle contraction, for other processes in daily activity. And for example, for students, persons who have light activity, all of these processes increased amount of energy in 50 to 70% per day. That's why you can summarize basal metabolic rate and additional amount 50 or 70% to receive your amount of energy, how many energy you should intake from food for normal activity in your tissues and cells. Again, it depends from weight, it depends from type of physical activity, but in general it's about 2,400, 2,800 kilocalories per day. So if you know this minimal and maximal value, you may calculate how many food you should intake for receive this amount of energy. And next component of healthy diet, you should intake not only food for energy production, but you should intake food for plastic functions, for enzymatic functions, and so on. And in this situation, you should know about main principles for healthy diet, and these principles including proportion between different types of food. This proportion should include prevalence of carbohydrates, prevalence of polymeric molecules to monomeric. They should intake essential amino acids and unsaturated fats, and of course they should intake not many lipids, but you should remember lipids still necessary, and we could not exclude from our diet cholesterol and other components of fats, and small amount of minerals for stabilizing enzymatic activity in our body. So this is all principles for used nutrition in our body. Thank you for your attention.